Hi, Hope Haven Events. My name is Sarah Treflick. I am living in Provo, Utah now, and I have a message to share about healing racial tension in the United States and breaking over those barriers and helping people who feel victimized and systematically oppressed to really rise to their full potential and their power, and helping people understand that we can build bridges in the community. There are a few things that I want to talk about at our convention, just some of the stepping stones about how we can do this. The first one is understanding those barriers, that they come from not just the people themselves, but in our own hearts, because we can't change other people. We can only change ourselves. So as we come and look and address our fears, our generational patterns, the things that have been passed down through us, through media, through our historic narrative, and other things that kind of give us these images of who people of other races are, even if we don't believe them consciously, our subconscious might act against them in ways, not overtly, but in our own hearts. And so at this conference, I want to help the people there to learn how to clear that out. One of the ways that we can do that is by kind of addressing what they are. So I know in my own history, I have ancestors. I don't believe I've had any slave owners or anything like that, but I've had people who God has told me that their intention has been to create this divide, the systematic divide between classes, between races, so that they would have power. And so I've been able to clear out a lot of that from my own life. And I believe that, when we're all together, we can just have a general clearing session of what kinds of things, go on in their generational ancestors. We can figure out, who, if anybody was a slave owner, we can figure out if anybody was part of these secret combinations intended to bring out class and racial distinction and inequality, and or who were just victims of kind of their environment, and then their belief system was passed down from generation to generation. Right there in that conference, we can do so much work and make a huge shift just by clearing out the ancestors of the people who live there. I mean, who are present there, not who live there. So that way they're able to kind of move forward from that. And of course, I would say, only to those people who feel like that's what they want. Hopefully all the people there will want that, but I understand, I don't want to kind of mess with anybody's ancestry if they're not ready to go to that place. So set the intention for that. I will clear that out through dowsing with a pendulum. That's one of my gifts that I've been given. The second thing I want to do is to teach how to kind of clear out recognize those beliefs in ourselves more specifically by tapping. So we all know, emotional freedom technique. You can say, even though and then we can talk about a lot of different false beliefs. So even though I'm afraid of Black people, or even though I'm afraid of white people, or even though I'm afraid that somebody's going to hurt me, or that terrorists are going to come to our country. And I'm going to be really frank, and I'm going to be really specific. And this particular part might be a little bit triggering, but we're going to clear it out. And then we're going to visualize ourselves kind of coming into this community of people from all walks of life, and visualize cutting cords, having empathy towards them, sending light and love towards them. So that's the part about generational stuff, clearing out anger and fear. And then the third thing that I want to do is really help focus on ideas and ways that we can learn to reach out. So there are a lot of wonderful people who really reach out, and I'm not going to discount anything that they do, but I just want to, for the people who feel like they can't or feel that they're afraid, really kind of address those issues. So we've gotten some of those out with the tapping, right? Like, even though I can't talk to someone on the street, or even though I'm not good enough to know how to really create change in my life, I deeply and truly love and accept myself and forgive myself. That will, or in the lives of my community, or with refugees, or there's too many people to help that I can't do it, or like a myriad of other things. We're going to go through one by one by one and just tap it out so that we create space for bringing in this energy of a belief system that we're not afraid to hit hard on the real issues of what's going on in other communities. Then the third thing that I want to do is, like I said, help teach people about reaching out. But I'm going to tell a story about a man named Saladin. Now, Saladin, I learned this from reading a book called The Anatomy of Peace, which was written by the Arbinger Institute. I haven't written this book, but it's one of the best books ever written, in my opinion. And it's really about how we create peace with other people in our families, communities, and in the world through first changing our own hearts. It really teaches us how to do what the Savior asked by loving our enemies. So Saladin was a man who lived in around the 12th century, early 12th century, during the Crusades, and he was Muslim. He was a Muslim captain in the army, and he later became like really high-ranking ruler. But of course, since it was the Crusades, there were literally people who were out to get him and his people. There were enemy invaders. And if anybody understands about loving his enemies, it's this guy. So even though he recognized that it was really important for him to fight against his enemies, he understood exactly who his enemies were, number one. And I think that's something that we don't necessarily understand in our community. There are people who write articles or who do things, and we think that they're the enemy because they're saying something about white privilege or about racial issues, and they're maybe riling up others. But if we really learn to understand their message, then which happens when we first open our hearts to understanding them, then we're better able to kind of hear what they're saying, validate what they're saying, and then come together on what do we agree with? How can we work together to move forward in this area? But anyways, I get off topic. But Saladin, he was known as a person who was very, very, very merciful to the people who were against him. So there would be prisoners of war and who he's captured in the offending army who would come to him and say, Saladin, my family is being held captive by these people, or there was a woman whose baby was actually stolen, like who was kidnapped. And not only so her family or her friends said, hey, you should go and talk to Saladin about this because he will help you. Even though she was Christian, she was in the offending camp. And so she decided to go and talk to him about it. And not only did he help her to get her baby back, but he also specifically paid with his own money the ransom money to get her baby back. Like I said, there were prisoners of war who had problems with their families, and he would pull strings to make sure that families could be together, that people could be set free, that they were able to go home, or if they wanted to stay in this place, that they were able to, live well and be free under his rule, even though it was Muslim rule. There were so many people in so many different religions, Christian, Islam, Judaism, etc., who lived in his land because he just cared about people. And this is the kind of feeling, it's like even though he was at war with another people, his heart wasn't at war with them. We see the same kind of thing that happens with, Captain Helaman and Captain Moroni in the Book of Mormon. We see the same thing that happens with the sons of Mosiah who went to the Lamanites and they said, hey, I want to teach them. And they said, no, you can't. They're your enemies. They're ferocious. They're going to kill you. And even though for a while, those people, they were put in prison and they did have real enemies because of their faith in God and because they believed in the truth that they were teaching, they didn't care. So I know and I honestly believe that if we get out our fears and our false beliefs and learn to trust in God, then we won't care if we have enemies. We won't care if there are people who are coming to attack us within our own communities or overseas. It doesn't matter because we'll learn to discern who our enemies are, exactly who we need to attack them, and how. But right now, the politics and the way things are going, we're making decisions based off of fear. We're making decisions based off of hate. We're making decisions based off of kind of this immature response, and we're not following the Savior's counsel to love our enemies. It doesn't matter if we get killed ultimately, right? Because it has to do with nothing can keep us from the love of God. We fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness of this world. And I know that when we choose to rely on Heavenly Father and trust in Him and work towards getting out all of this anger, all of this fear, and all of this feeling of victimization and powerlessness and no control, then we're going to be able to move forward with a strong front with God no matter what happens in our country. And these are the kinds of things that I want to talk about. I'm also writing a book about this in a lot more depth, and so I'm going to have that presented at the conference. But I'm really excited. That book is called The Gathering of Scattered Israel: Race Relations in the Church in the 21st Century. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really looking forward to the event. I know it's a little bit different, but I know that because our gifts and our talents and our relationships with God give us this insight about how to heal, not just heal ourselves emotionally, not just heal our relationships. We can step it up to the next level to start healing our communities and even the world. Thank you.